Hi, I'm Mary Wing Soares, and I'm here today with Tim Thompson, the town planner. We're bringing you a planning board preview, something that we hope will be a monthly addition to LACTV's lineup. And we hope to let you know what's coming up on our planning board agenda and explain what this might mean to the layperson who doesn't spend every Wednesday with us. So, Tim, I see that we have a very light agenda this coming Wednesday.
Yes. Typically the month of February is a light month for the planning board just because of construction season normally being during the spring. And a lot of construction projects have wrapped up for the year. So the beginning of the year is usually a good time for the planning board to start working on more advanced planning topics, as well as it's also February of every year is where we go through our growth management determination, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But our first agenda is February 3rd. We have one item on the agenda this month, and that is a Lot 1 adjustment for Mr. and Mrs. Richard Higgins on Pillsbury Road. On the screen, I have an aerial photograph of the property in question. It's, again, located on Pillsbury Road, across from the greenhouses. There are two parcels of land, first being Mr. Higgins' house, and then a property that he rents in the back. What they're proposing to do with this particular lot, these two lots I should say, is to adjust the lot line. Let me see if I can zoom in here for the viewers at home. Okay.
Isn't part of that land in a performance, don't we own the development rights on part
We
of
do
that
own the
land?
development rights. A large portion of the property is actually under conservation easement today. I'll be able to show that line once this zooms in for me. And I'm apologizing for being a little too close.
So this is just...
They're not creating any new lots. What they're actually doing is adjusting where the line is today to essentially, if you see, it may be a little bit difficult to see, the current property line follows where I'm mousing over right now and divides the property in this section. The new property line would run in this dark line and then run back to the southwestern corner of the property where it actually abuts Winding Pond Road, where Century Village currently has a cul-de-sac. The property owner's been to the Zoning Board of Adjustment to receive a variance to create this lot with less than the required frontage that's required typically in a subdivision, and they're going to be creating a new driveway access actually off of Winding Pond Road to access the existing rental house in the back of the property, and then giving the majority of the remainder of the property back to the original historic house and barn. I'll zoom back out here so I can give you an idea where the conservation easement line is. Basically, from this part right here is the edge of the conservation easement. So all of the property to the northeast of that line, which is basically this entire parcel here, the orange representing the wetlands, the green representing the upland areas, that is all under conservation easement today, and the development rights have been restricted so that no further development can take place on that particular lot.
You know, I think what the most confusing thing about Londonderry is that you think that these parcels are so far away from each other, but to think that this abuts Century Village,
Sure.
which is...
And I think the aerial photos probably do a good job of showing that. Yeah, again, here's Pillsbury Road, and you can see some of the units of Century Village located in the top part of your photo. Again, as most people know, Century Village then outlets back to Route 102 via Winding Pond Road. So the Century Village property is actually one of the larger multifamily developments in town. Several, I believe it's in the neighborhood of a couple hundred acres of development. So you are talking about a large parcel that actually does reach that far back towards Pillsbury.
And there's only one way in and out of Winding Pond Road,
Correct.
Right?
There is only one outlet. That's a development that occurred back prior to the requirements of the planning board now has requiring multiple means of access if your roadway is greater than 1,200 feet long. There's still many of those in town that predate the changes to the regulations, but a development of that nature today wouldn't be permitted unless there were multiple means of access to the property.
Now, this is probably a question I would ask if I was sitting up on the planning board right now, and You said that this will allow an access from Winding Pond Road to the apartments and in the back. Currently, the access is from Pillsbury?
Currently, there's a shared driveway that both existing homes share that goes from Pillsbury Road past the historic home occupied by the Higgins and then back to the rental property in the rear of the property.
So is there any concern that that would become a drive-through?
There is not. The other part of the, at least assuming the planning board agrees with staff recommendations, is that they are going to remove and loam and seed a portion of the existing shared driveway, so there will not be a means of getting back and forth from Winding Pond Road through the property and into Century Village.
So now the only access to the apartment will be from Winding Pond Road?
Correct.
Okay. So these are just, you would make that presentation
Correct.
to the planning board and we would all comment and ask questions.
Sure.
And then it would be open to the public and anybody, any abutters, anybody who lives and might have the same kind of concern that I had with it becoming a cut-through would come and could ask questions, and then the planning board would make their decision as to whether or not we would go with staff recommendation. Have we ever not gone with staff recommendation?
There have been instances in the past. It's very rare. For the most part, I think that the staff, myself and John Trotter from the Public Works Department, have developed a level of trust with the planning board where we've demonstrated to the board that our recommendations are reasonable, fair to both the town and to the developing property owners. So I think that level of trust has been an important component of improving the development review process in Londonderry over the course of the last several years.
So do I. And so that's the only thing that we have on our agenda for that night.
That is, other than our typical administrative board work. For people who aren't familiar with how our process works, we have 2 monthly meetings for the planning board each month. The first meeting is where we hear new applications for development. We also take care of administrative board work, things like minutes, determining regional impact on particular projects, discussions with staff. Our second meeting of the month is more oriented towards longer-term planning. It's where we hold conceptual discussions, workshop discussions on ordinance or regulation amendments, master planning efforts, and things of that nature. And we also hold conceptual and workshop public hearings as well for ordinance and regulation amendments. So the basic premise is that we take care of the development business the first meeting, and we take care of the actual planning business the second meeting of the month. That's ultimately the goal of the scheduling process. Planning board meetings are open to the public. We invite everybody to attend if they have a particular interest on any particular topic, whether it's on the agenda or not. I think you'll find the planning board is receptive to new ideas, to listening to differing viewpoints. And I think that we've come a long way in the 10 years I've worked here in Londonderry in terms of the planning board, its interaction with both the public and with the development community.
And I know the term regional impact might seem very simple and so easily understood by many people, but would you just take a second and tell us what kind of a thing would give us a regional impact?
There's a state statute that requires the towns, our planning boards, to determine whether a project is of regional impact. We've actually utilized some criteria that's been put together by a regional planning commission that gives us a set of criteria that says if you meet any of these criteria, planning board should probably make a determination it's regional impact. Typically, it's where you're very close to a municipal boundary or straddling a municipal boundary. We've had several instances of those where we have had properties that are both in Londonderry and Hudson or Londonderry and Derry in certain circumstances. In those circumstances, regardless of how big or small the project is, staff would recommend that it be determined to be regional impact so that the abutting community and the regional planning commissions have some input to the project. That's really what it is. Development of regional impact just allows additional input to either communities or regional planning commissions that typically don't comment through the review process. Other projects would be, large retail or industrial developments that have significant amounts of traffic or things of that nature. Without the actual list in front of me, because we don't see a lot of regional impact projects in Londonderry, but there is a formalized process. The planning board has opted to do that process at initial application long before the projects actually are presented to the planning board, so that the applicant still has time to coordinate reviews with other communities and with the regional planning commissions.
Is there also a benefit, though, if there is a regional impact to both towns? Isn't there, like, if there are impact fees that have to be assessed? That would be another...
That's one of the things that I don't know if there's any real precedent in New Hampshire. I know some towns and cities have actually tried to assess impact fees on developments in other communities. I don't think they've ever actually gotten to the point of actually assessing them or collecting them.
Right.
That's an area of land use law that I don't think has really been decided in New Hampshire, but it is certainly one of the items that's open for discussion when we have a regional impact for a project of that size and nature.
Okay. And then you said the second meeting of the month is when we do our public hearings and when we do our workshop discussion. So we have some very interesting ones coming up, I think, in February.
The first thing we do each second meeting of February is Londonderry has a growth management ordinance that is intended to limit or measure the amount and pace of growth in Londonderry. Our ordinance is somewhat unique that it's not always in effect. A lot of communities simply have ordinances that say every year there's a certain limit on the number of permits that a town will issue. The way we do it in Londonderry is we have our ordinance set up so that we have set criteria where by March 1st of every year the planning board will evaluate those criteria and then determine whether or not the town is in sustainable growth, which means we don't need to enact any caps, or unsustainable growth where we're growing faster than the region and our local averages, and in those cases we'd then look to enact the permit cap.
And what would determine those things?
Sure. Quick presentation, assuming my laptop cooperates with me. Again, how the evaluation works, it's spelled out in our zoning ordinance. The determination has to be made by March 1st of every year. Our current ordinance requires that 2 out of our 3 criteria have to be met to declare unsustainable growth. And we also do an evaluation on our former growth management ordinance because of the way it's structured. And in that situation, for those older projects, we actually require that 3 out of the 3 criteria be met. What are the criteria? The first is that we look at the number of building permits that were authorized by the town, and we compare that to the 6-year average in Londonderry over the previous 6 years. If we determine that in 2009, for example, we issued more permits than the 6-year average from 2003 to 2009, we then determine that we've exceeded the pace for the previous 6 years and that criteria would be met.
Do you remember what the average was last year?
The average last year, I believe, was 110 when we were looking at the evaluation for 2009. And we issued, I believe, in 2008 about 40 permits, so we were well less than the number of permits for our 6-year average. The second criteria we look at is the regional perspective and whether or not our growth is exceeding that of the region. In our case, we consider the region to be the 6 municipalities that abut Londonderry. So we're talking about Auburn, Derry, Wyndham, Litchfield, Hudson, and Manchester. Again, if we find that we're growing at a rate faster than all of those communities, we determine that that criteria is met. The third criteria is actually 3 criteria in one. There's 3 subparts. We look at fiscal strain on the town's local municipal services. We look at school enrollment and school capacity, strain on public facilities, and then the percentage of our total budget appropriations that are made up of capital improvements. If any one of those 3 are met, then we'd make the determination that that we've met that criteria.
Well, with all the news of the school enrollment going down, we certainly wouldn't be looking at it for that.
Again, I don't like to make predictions, but based on the state of the economy, I think all communities in southern New Hampshire have seen a decline in residential development. I would be very surprised if we get the information, which is not available yet, as it is every year. We utilize U.S. Census data for building permit information. It's typically not available until roughly the first week of February, so I'm usually scrambling the week before the meeting to finally put together all the information, but just based on past knowledge and, again, the way the economy's been, I would be very surprised if we need to put a building permit cap in this year.
But I wonder, though, since everybody's in the same boat, wouldn't it be interesting if Londonderry did have
It's still
more
growing faster than the region.
Right.
That's still always a possibility,
Right.
but again, that's why we look at it from the 3-pronged approach. Because, again, the statute requires that you have to look at it from a regional perspective, but you also need to take care of what is specifically happening in Londonderry in our unique perspective.
Absolutely. And then the other thing will be our workshop discussion on Exit 5 and the Performance Overlay District.
Yes.
And this has evolved over 2.5 years.
It has. This really started, really go back to the 2004 master plan. which I'll get to on not this slide, but the next one. But we also have just completed in September of 2009 a small area master plan looking at northwest Londonderry. And out of that plan, several recommendations came out specific to Route 28 and Exit 5. Specifically that the area is currently a major transportation and commercial center for Londonderry. Having the two exits off I-93 is an attractive thing for retail and commercial development. We've also had since the mid-2000s a performance overlay district currently that goes from Exit 5 to Sanborn Road that has had the effect of putting development a little bit under the town's control, slowing development and taking a chance for the town to really examine specifically what we want to do. Now that we've gone through the process of the 2004 master plan and the small area plan, the planning board is now in a position to start looking at what is appropriate to do for zoning out in that area moving forward.
And wasn't it that was supposed to be a temporary measure, just sort of a stopgap for us to be able to take some time and plan?
That is the general sense that we as staff got when we initially started looking at this concept of performance overlay district. It was focused on Route 102, specifically in reaction to the pace of development that was happening with Home Depot, Hannaford, what ended up being the Nevins elderly housing development that was originally proposed to be over 700 units of apartments. The town council had asked the planning board back then to examine a growth moratorium in town. The planning board, after consultation with legal counsel and staff, opted to move towards a zoning change direction, took the time to put together a performance standard approach to Route 102, which then morphed eventually into the performance overlay district. The Route 28 Performance Overlay District had a little bit of a different evolution. There was a conceptual discussion for a large retail development at Exit 5, which at the time prompted the planning board to say, we're not ready for this. Let's look at examining moving the POD to Route 28. It's similar to the one on 102, but it's a little bit different in terms of specific building sizes and footprints, which are some of the criteria that are in the ordinance.
Okay.
Specifically, what the small area plan recommended for Exit 5 was removing the the performance overlay district from that area from Sims and Vista Ridge Drive to Exit 5. So we're talking about a relatively small area of town. And then to either replace it with a transit-oriented development ordinance or another appropriate flexible zoning tool. Again, the area we're talking about is really the area that where the parking right is located, the Shell Tedeschi gas station, the former waste management transfer station, the former Varani, now Sovereign Realty office building, the subway, and then that large parcel of vacant land in front of the Vista Ridge development. Skip to the next slide here. So really we're talking about these parcels that the map is up on screen, you'll see outlined in blue. So it's basically from Exit 5 west to the intersection with Sims Drive and Vista Ridge Drive. The parcels we're specifically looking at we have a 27-acre piece. This is the one right in front of Vista Ridge that's currently vacant. From the aerial shot, you can get a relatively good shot of that. This is probably the prime development potential piece within the area that we're considering. There's been, again, lots of interest in the parcel. However, given the constraints of the performance overlay district, developers have been reluctant to move forward with a project in this area given the constraints that the ordinance would put on them. We're also looking at a couple of smaller parcels just to the front of that that by themselves probably wouldn't amount to much, but if they're combined with the larger parcel will probably generate into some relatively decent development if it's associated with the larger piece. So we've got those two small parcels at the corner of Vista Ridge and 28. And the other one, the next parcel is actually the Subway restaurant that's at the corner of Perkins Road and Route 28. There's also a single family home on that lot that people may not realize is actually on the same lot.
And it's not owned by the same person, is it?
They are owned by the same person.
Yeah.
The owner, the person who owns the Subway property is actually renting the home. So.
Oh, wow. That's a great commute, huh?
The next piece is the old Varani real estate building that's now owned by Sovereign Realty at the corner again of Perkins and Route 28. The next parcel that probably has the next best development potential would be the waste management site. It's a little over 8 acres, formerly used as a transfer station. We have heard some inklings from the state that they may be looking at that particular parcel for expansion of the park and ride that they've recently finished on Route 28. So that parcel may end up being taken out of the equation if the state ends up taking that over. Then there's the gas station adjacent to that, which currently houses Tedeschi and Shell. And I don't have a picture of the park and ride because when my pictures were taken, it was still under construction. So rather than a big pile of dirt, I just skipped that. And then lastly, the final parcel we're looking at is at the corner of Sims Drive and Route 28 that's currently occupied by a construction company's
So with the
offices.
exception of the transfer station, which predates the Performance Overlay District, was everything else developed under the Performance Overlay District?
No, actually, none of the parcels out there were actually developed. The only one that came in after the Performance Overlay District was the subway parcel. But because of the way the ordinance is structured, because the parcel is less than 3 acres, they're actually able to utilize the underlying zoning in this case, which was a general commercial district. So what the planning board chose to do at their meeting in January was to remove the POD from those parcels and then to develop a new mixed-use or alternative zoning district in place of the C2 zoning that is there currently. What we'll be discussing with the planning board on February 10th are where do we go from here? What uses are going to be appropriate for this section of town? Determining what kind of dimensional requirements for setbacks, open space, building coverage, lot coverage that the board wants to see. Any other criteria the board wants to see included in the ordinance like special permits or other types of performance criteria similar to what we do in the Performance Overlay District. Doing an ordinance like this from scratch, I like to compare it to, it's a little like sausage making. It's not pretty to see the actual process that goes forward, but you have to go through this initial step before you really start getting into ordinance development and drafting. Once I get those answers from the planning board, then my next step will be to develop an initial draft of the ordinance for the planning board to look at in March.
So the planning board has a little bit of homework to do. They have to come back to you with some ideas as to what they want to see up in that area. And so certainly the public input would be invaluable.
Yes. I think we had a very good cross-section of people that came to our meeting in January with differing opinions as to what the best course of action is for Exit 5 area. And I'd certainly encourage those people to come out again because we need that type of input. The planning board acting alone, the planning board needs to hear from the public as to what the public really ultimately wants to see in that area. We have some information from the small area master plan process, but again, the current people out there who have interest in the area, have interest in the town, quite frankly. This is an opportunity to help shape what the direction will be for Exit 5. Right.
But it's not just those people that live in that area that we'd love to see come out and talk to us about it. We'd love to see people from all over the town come in and talk to us. I'm sure when Hannaford and Home Depot were coming in and the apartments were coming in, I know that a lot of those people were from the neighborhoods right around there, but I'm sure there were more people in the town that were more interested in either saying, yes, this is what we want a big box store in here, or no, we'd rather see the towns, develop a little bit more slowly. So please, feel free to come in and express your opinions.
All perspectives and all viewpoints are really welcome at the planning board. We don't want to limit our discussion just to one side of the argument. If there's somebody who has development interests, who's a developer, who has ideas of what they'd like to do, those are the types of things the planning board would love to be able to hear so they can weigh those viewpoints versus the viewpoints of the residents of town versus the viewpoints of the staff and the planning board themselves. It's that mixing of opinions and comments that really help shape the direction that we want to take.
Exactly. Now I notice everything's scheduled for 7 o'clock.
Yes. That's a change from several years ago. What we used to do back when I first started 10 years ago in Londonderry, there was a specific time on the agenda for every public hearing. What we found is that because when you post a public hearing for a specific time, you can't start it until you hit that time. If we had a public hearing that was scheduled for 8 o'clock and we finished all our other business by 7:15, there were 45 minutes of time that the planning board had to kill before they could actually go to the next item on the agenda.
No wonder we have nobody watching.
About 7 years ago, the staff made the suggestion that we post all public hearings for 7 p.m. That way, we can move from item to item on the agenda and even move items around if the chairman finds that there's a significant amount of people in the audience that are for something that's last on the agenda. It's within the chairman's authority to actually move that item up on the agenda to help people get home earlier if they're interested in getting home after that agenda item is completed.
And I know we've done that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Tim, thank you so much. Is there anything else you think we need to do for this first show of the
If nothing else, I apologize for not having anything more exciting to talk about for the first show. I think that I really am excited about the opportunity to be able to get on TV in advance of the planning board meetings, give people an idea of what's going to be coming up. The planning board really does have a large role in shaping how the future of Londonderry is going to be developed. Between the airport area, Exit 5, there's a lot of things that are ripe for change once we see the economy start to pick up. So we certainly encourage people who have interest and those who have a slight interest that planning board meetings are not always the most exciting things to watch and to attend, but they do important work. And also, just for a heads up for anybody who is interested, we do still have a vacant alternate position available now that we've had a member of our board not to move forward with reappointment. So we do have a vacant alternate position. The alternate position is a great way to get your feet wet. I know you're familiar with it. That's how you started.
That is how I started.
And it's a great way to understand how the process works, watch and learn from some of the more older seasoned members of the board. And ultimately, we want to see those members move on and become full members of the board as we move forward in the future.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Again, and I appreciate the opportunity, and you know, we hope that this has been informative for you and that it will encourage you to either watch or come down and visit us at the planning board meetings. They are held the first and second Wednesdays of the month, beginning at 7 o'clock in the evening at the town hall offices.
And just anybody has any additional questions or concerns, you can always contact me at Town Hall. I'm at extension 103, or by email, it's tthompson, THOMPSON, at londonderrynh.org. And I certainly have no issue. I deal with citizen calls and emails all the time. It's one of the things I enjoy doing is helping to educate the public. So
Great.
I really look forward to doing this every month.
Thank you.